Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Paul Follows, Leader of the Council and Chair of this meeting executive. This meeting is being held in the Council Chamber at the Berries in Godalming and is being webcast live. The agenda was published on Monday, the 24th of March 2025, and a supplementary agenda pack was subsequently published on Thursday, the 27th of March 2025. Item 1, apologies. Chris, any apologies for absence?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, apologies from councillors Janet Crow and also Gemma Long. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Item 2, the minutes of the meetings on the 4th, 11th and 18th of March 2025 published on the website. Can I have all those in favour of the minutes, please? Thank you all. Item 3, declarations of interest. Anyone? Nope. And moving forward on to questions from members of the public. There has been one question from a member of the public, which I'm going to take first as it was properly recorded under the procedural rules. I will then be moving under Rule 30, Rule 14, motion without notice, a temporary suspension of standing orders in order to take two questions from members of the public outside of the established process under a scope that I will suggest when I move that motion. But before I do that, I'm going to take the registered speaker from the member of the public, which is Andy Jeffrey. Andy, would you like to come forward? Now, I think your question has been taken by Councillor Mark Merriweather, who you have to really, really shove it. It's really stiff, even more than I thought, apparently. Blimey, what's happened with that? Bravo, Andy. For anybody else coming up, I suggest the other door. Mark, I think you've got a response to the first question, and if there's a supplementary, I shall come to you in a second, Andy.
Yeah, I have. Andy, do you want to read the question out? I'm happy to do it.
The question has been submitted, Councillor Merriweather, so I'm happy for you just to proceed.
Okay. Would you like me to read it out? I think you've been given a printed copy of the answer, but I'm happy to read it out.
I haven't been given a printed copy as yet.
Oh, well, I'll read it out then.
Yeah,
I'll read it out. Okay. So the Community Asset Transfers Policy is in place to provide a transparent, fair and consistent framework for considering the appropriateness of applications for asset transfers between the Council and organisations and groups. The Council has an obligation to fully consider the implications of community asset transfers as part of robust corporate asset management processes to ensure it protects the interests of the existing Council and its successor Council as long-term custodians of its assets. A thorough assessment of risks and sustainable business cases is essential steps to undertake before any transfer can be recommended for approval, together with financial implications for the Council and its successor. The Council has to ensure that any transfer provides value for money and best consideration in the case of land and building transfers. The Community Asset Transfers Policy clearly sets out the detailed requirements for an application to be submitted and information which the business case needs to contain. Godalming Town Council can therefore aid the process by providing full detailed information which clearly demonstrates how their application meets all of the requirements set out in the policy. At this point in time, while we haven't seen a large increase in applications, we are aware that this is a possibility. So if so, the first instance will be most resource intensive for the applicant in preparing appropriate submissions. We are alert to this, and that not only will this be a demand on our limited resources, but also that the time frame for our processing of them may be curtailed by an unreasonable deadline. The Council will keep resources under review to ensure that applications can be considered within reasonable timelines insofar as they allow. Now, if you have a follow-up, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather, and that's much appreciated and fully understood. One of the issues that we have at Godalming Town Council is that having seen the response from Waverley Borough Council setting out its requirement that the fees and the legal fees are met by the applicant, which Godalming Town Council fully understands and is stated within the Waverley community asset transfer policy, there is no indication of what those legal fees may be. And therefore, I am unable to go to my council to be able to make an agreement that we will meet those fees, because legally I am unable to write an open cheque for that. So an indication of what Waverley expects those legal fees to be would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I entirely understood, entirely reasonable, and I will take that up with officers.
That's quite likely to impact everybody applying for that community asset transfer policy at the moment.
Yeah,
so we need to get that out
actually,
sharpish.
it's something that's come up before. So I'll give officers a prod. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Andy. Right, as I mentioned previously, under Rule 14, I'm going to move a notice to temporarily suspend standing orders with the following scope: to allow 2 members of the public to speak as if they had registered in this particular forum. That means that you ideally need to ask a question rather than make a statement, at which point I will ask the relevant portfolio holder to speak if they want to or can respond, or I will in their absence. If we aren't able to respond to the question as tabled here, we will respond in writing. I think it's within a set number of days. I'd have to absolutely check the scheme, but it's within a set number of days. There will be a number of things I'm sure that we've already answered on this particular subject, so it might be that we send out a repeat of the answer. As you have just observed, you will also be entitled to a supplementary question as well. So if you could keep the questions to questions rather than statements, we'll endeavour to do our best to answer them. But before I do that, I need to make sure this is done properly. Please, can I have a seconder for my motion to suspend standing orders under that scope? Victoria, can I have all those in favour of the temporary suspension of standing orders? Thank you, everyone. This will be limited to the 2 speakers, as I've mentioned. Sir, please, would you introduce yourself and state your question?
Hi, I'm Rupert Wingfield, and one of the house owners that has been negatively impacted by Waverley's SIL legislation. My question is, does this executive committee have a genuine intent to implement a homeowner's discretionary review, specifically in line with West Berkshire's discretionary homeowner's SIL review process, which was independent?
I can answer that one straight away. At the moment, that item is coming to the May the 6th version of this meeting. The reason that it might come the week later is because we have to call an emergency session to deal with the local government reorganisation changes that have to be issued on May the 9th. So I'm saying right now it should be on the agenda for May the 6th, but that may move to, I think, the week after. Yeah, May the 13th. Yeah. So it will be maximum of May the 13th. That will be on the agenda here, but it still might be May the 6th. I'm looking as to see whether it makes sense to do it on that night as well. So May the 6th or May the 13th is when that will come back here for a formal decision. And
will it be in line with West Berkshire's discretionary review?
I believe so, from what I've seen, but to be honest, I think we need to look at the details. Liz, do you have any advance on this? Because otherwise we can respond in writing.
Could I ask you to turn off your microphone? Because otherwise we get a bit of feedback. Thank you. And then turn it on again when you want to speak. Thank you. So I was going to speak about this. So anyway, so I can assure members here and residents that the council is committed to carrying out a discretionary review where householders previously subject to SIL liability can request a discretionary review by the council within a window from the 1st of June 2025 to the 31st of May 2026. A report will be considered at an executive decision-making meeting in May, as the leader has outlined. The report will set out the proposed approach for the discretionary SIL householder review at Waverley Borough Council. I'm sure that we all recognise that the SIL regulations are rigid, and in adopting SIL in 2018, the council has a requirement to abide with all the legal requirements of the regulations. When SIL was adopted in 2018 under the previous administration, the council did not include the provision for discretionary relief. It is acknowledged that the concept of a discretionary review is not an aspect allowed for or defined within the SIL regulations. However, the council has agreed to commence this review to explore what actions could be taken due to genuine mistakes by homeowners or their representatives or other circumstances beyond their control which resulted in a SIL payment being due. There have been a number of extremely speculative and scaremongering comments about the nature of this review by some councillors, which is very concerning, bearing in mind they have the opportunity to speak to officers and to speak to the portfolio holder, and they haven't taken up that opportunity. However, I would like to assure residents again that we are committed to investigating and assessing each individual case that is submitted to the council, and the process for undertaking this will be fully disclosed in the report coming to executive at the beginning of May. Thank you, Leader.
Just on the independence of that review, who is going to be on that panel? How do we get comfort that this is an independent review and not just by planning officers?
The process for the review will be in that report. I don't have that report at present. It's being prepared at the moment by officers, and that will be in collaboration with our finance department and also our legal department.
Just to be clear, I think that report, if it is coming to the 6th of May council, will probably be in the public domain mid-April, something like that, bit later than that, end of April. And if it's the week after, it will be the week after that. So it will be on the public website by the end of April, that report. And I would just add, and I was going to say this at the end, I will often do things like suspend standing orders because it's quite unreasonable for me to expect members of the public to know our constitutional rules backwards. Certainly that's something I expect councillors to know when they're advising members of the public. But what the process is that you can respond, you can register to speak on any item in the way that you've done, that say Andy did previously, 4 days in advance, maximum of 4 days before a meeting. And members of the council can do that as well as a general question. But members of the council can also register to speak on any item on the agenda as recently as midday, a day of meeting. And of course, there is an item on SIL on the agenda today, so that would have been possible. Okay, I think there was one other speaker that we said we'd do under this before we move back to the regular meeting. Thank you for your patience. 28th of April is the publication date, just to be aware of that, okay? And as before, if you could introduce yourself before your question. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jane Wingfield. I am a home owner who's been negatively impacted by SIL. I wanted to ask the executive, please, if they will acknowledge that Regulation 65(7) grants Waverley Borough Council full powers to withdraw a SIL liability notice for whatever reasons it sees appropriate to do so. Will the executive acknowledge that, please?
I think we're comfortable to acknowledge that that's what the regulation says, yes. I don't think there's anything else I can add to that, but that is, I'm sure, what the regulation says.
For whatever reason you deem fit? Yes. Okay.
But at the same time, I do think you have to recognise that we can't in ourselves act unlawfully in the withdrawal of a SIL liability. So there are things we have to do here. This is not a straightforward process, as I think if anybody's been advising you that it is a straightforward process, I would possibly consider widening your advice. Did you have a supplementary question?
No, but I think I am extremely aware that it's not a straightforward process. Thank you.
And actually, I will just say before I move out of this section, one of the problems here, we've effectively got, I think, 3 categories of individual in this process. We've got individuals who may have had some fault of the council, and although we're still checking the details, that, for example, I think would be Mr. Daly, who we've looked at, and I think most of us have concluded he was told something in error, and I so think there will probably be some remediation that needs to take place there. There are individuals who have been advised poorly by private advice that they have procured as part of their building project, at which point, yes, I can understand their frustration with the council, but actually their issue is with the private advice that they procured that has been inaccurate. And actually their first course of resolution would be through the liability insurance of the private advice that they were provided that was inaccurate. And thirdly, there are individuals who disagree with the concept of homeowner SIL, but have therefore been charged legally for it at this point in time. And that's subject to a different discussion about whether we should charge homeowners for SIL or not. It broadly falls into those three camps as far as I can see it at the moment.
So are we not all in agreement that homeowners are not liable for SIL?
At the moment, homeowners are liable for SIL under the process that's established by the policy of the council, passed by the administration in 2018 of this council.
Not the intention
of the
legislation.
Right, we're straying outside of what we're talking about now, but Liz, did you want to do any final comments?
I just want to clarify that the exemption does require the homeowner or whoever's acting on behalf of the homeowner to fill out certain forms. That is the requirement. And obviously, within the discretionary review, anybody that is applying for a discretionary review can submit all their evidence on that point. I can't keep answering questions back. It's not a question and answer session.
No, but
so I'm sorry. That is my answer at the moment. Anything legal or technical will have to be dealt with by our legal team. I do not in any way, and no councillor is an expert on SIL at all.
No, I understand that, but the intention of the legislation is that homeowners are exempt, isn't it? I think we all agree with that, surely.
No, I don't think we can agree with that, because actually there are certain types of homeowner project that would in fact be like, I think quite reasonably be liable to SIL based on the scale of it. I mean, right, if they filled the forms in and they've been accepted, that's one thing, but we're talking about if you've not filled the forms in or not. So this is a different discussion, right? Can we just, I think we've opened this up as much as we reasonably can do. So there'll be some responses back in writing, but I think actually the law is quite clear on this from a certain perspective. So we will go into this in further detail on the session on either May the 6th or 13th, where the SIL discretionary scheme report is reviewed by this executive and discussed at that point. As I think we said, it'd be in the public domain on the 28th, did you say? On the 28th. Okay, and keep in mind, you'd need to then register 4 days before the 6th if you wanted to come and speak on that and ask questions, okay? Thank you. Right, I'm now going to move back into standing orders being in effect. Okay, in which case then we'll go on to questions from members, of which there has been none. And then we go on to updates from members of the executive, in which case I'll start with Tony and go round.
No updates for this meeting.
Okay, Victoria?
None for me, thank you.
Steve?
None for me, thank you.
Liz?
Yeah, I just want to carry on with what I was going to say. And I'm very aware that the SIL process which you're undertaking has several strands, and that these can unfortunately become intertwined due to the language that is used. Even councillors can mistake, you know, one review for another. So I do appreciate how difficult it is for members of the public. To clarify, there are 3 strands of work which one could term as a review being undertaken by this council. I have, in answer to the question that was provided, outlined what the discretionary review is, which will allow applicants who have previously, householders who have received a SIL liability, to be able to ask for a discretionary review of their case. And each of those cases will be looked at individually. So that is a discretionary review. And as I've explained, that is not part of SIL regulations, but it's something that this council has committed itself to do. I would also like to clarify that there is ongoing review work that takes place in this council alongside the administration of SIL. And perhaps, you know, it would be more useful to refer to this as monitoring. And officers carry this out on a continuous basis. And this review work has been referred to by officers. And I think, you know, we had a conversation within the Audit and Risk Committee, which referred to the review. And that is the ongoing review that takes place with the administration of SIL. This work checks that notices have been issued for developments which are SIL liable in accordance with the Council's adopted SIL charging structure and requirements of the SIL Regulations 2010 as amended. For residential developments, SIL is charged on new floor space of 100 square metres or more and new annexes or dwellings of any size. The SIL regulations offer the opportunity for relief or exemption to be applied for in certain circumstances, including for self-built housing, residential annexes and extensions. However, the procedure for eligibility and application for such relief and exemption is set by the SIL regulations and applies very strict parameters. So that is the second review. The third review that we are doing is the review of the overall charging schedule, which outlines the charges that will be levied by development type. This will be undertaken along with the development of the new local plan, for which the evidence base is currently being gathered. The SIL charging schedule will be reviewed to ensure consistency and appropriateness for the local plan. And this review is carried out through a formal process, and the charging schedule must go through independent examination in public before it can be adopted by the council. This is a longer process, as we are all aware, and the local plan proposed adoption date is currently July 2028. So that is 3 reviews, not to be confused, and I know there has been some confusion about this, and councillors need to be very clear what review they are talking about when they're talking to residents, and I would urge councillors to refer any questions on SIL to the head of planning, to Claire, so that she can answer them with an informed professional opinion. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. And I'll just reiterate that that is backed up by an email that was sent by the monitoring officer to all members today, reminding them that they do need to make sure that that goes to the head of planning and nobody else, so that it can be dealt with properly according to the processes that we're working to establish.
And Leader, I would be very, very concerned if councillors are speaking to members of the public and raising false impressions of what the SIL reviews are and what the discretionary review is as well. Thank you.
And I think one of the things that the discussion we have just had is that clearly there has been some inaccurate advice passed on to residents. And I think that's something that we'll need to take up in a separate place. Councillor Merriweather.
Not from me this evening. I'm sorry, there you go.
Councillor Rivers.
Nothing from me, Leader.
Councillor Mirrlees.
Yes. It's going to be on a happier note, I think. Thriving communities. All the organisations have been informed about their Thriving Communities funding, and funding agreements are being drawn up. The uplift in funding agreed by the Executive in February has made a huge difference, and organisations were really pleased with the outcome. We are now funding 31 organisations in round 2. We only had 23 in round 1, so that growth fund was very useful to us. Officers and Voluntary Action South West Surrey are working closely with certain organisations to provide support where their funding has decreased. The Household Support Fund, that closed on the 31st of March. That was round 6. And from our allocation, we awarded £40,000 to identified voluntary sector partners. We retained £26,000 to operate an open application scheme. But our application scheme supported 102 households with grants of £250 to help them pay bills and buy essential household items. The majority of applicants were in receipt of one or more benefits, although this wasn't a criteria for funding. But yes, I think that's all good news. And that's it. Thank you.
I would agree with that completely, and thank you for bringing some good news. Just a couple of things from me to conclude before we move on to the main agenda. As you can imagine, we've carried on with the meetings of all of the leaders to discuss our favourite subject of local government reorganisation. This week there was discussion as to the geographical makeup of the 2 and 3 unitary models that are being discussed, so that we could get a bit further on that. We are waiting to hear anything, in fact, from the government as to what their thinking is and what their decision perhaps is. Lots of rumours as to when we think we'll hear that and what exactly we will hear, but obviously that's something that I will update members and members of the public on when and if we get an update in the next few days, weeks or months. The only thing else to say on that is, and there'll be an email sent, I think, to all members of this council tomorrow. It is likely that we'll be having to do a similar process that as we undertook a couple of weeks ago in regards to the decision-making aspect of this process. So obviously we did phase 1 last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. My brain has lost track of the time, frankly, considering how much LGR we've been talking about. But we will need to go through that process again, and I believe that we'll be doing that on May the 6th, where there'll be an extraordinary council meeting put in, and what would have been the regular meeting of the executive in the diary that night will be subsumed by the LGR section 2 that the exec have to agree. Yes, of course, Tony, after you.
Sorry, everyone, with apologies. You probably saw me doing a little bit of jiggery-pokery in the background, having a look at some figures that came to me just prior to this meeting. I think it's pretty good news, actually, particularly for Farnham businesses, in that I can confirm that, as far as I can see, based on actual tickets sold, which probably is the best indicator of people using our car parks, there has been no visible impact on parking in Farnham as a result of the Farnham infrastructure or town centre improvement works that started earlier this year. Certainly March 25 versus March 24, nigh on identical. And March 25 versus January and February, and those of you who can remember that far back will remember that January and February, the weather was shocking, as actually it was last year as well. And we saw a significant downturn in footfall, certainly in Farnham, because of the weather. But no, March 25 appears to be no different to March 24, and indeed slightly up on Jan 25 and February 25, which is, I think, is good.
And finally, just one other thing. Firstly, can I say thank you to Claire Upton Brown for fielding an immense numbers of questions, not just on that SIL matter, but on a number of others. And this is while trying to also do a new local plan process, which takes 2.5 seconds to say, but is a significant amount of work that needs to be recognised for the sheer amount that it is. And finally, just to clarify, to correct something I just said to those residents, and I will make sure that I email them to make this correction, but just do so for the minutes. If the meeting is on a Tuesday, which of course is what we're talking about here, the deadline is 5 p.m. the previous Wednesday, so 4 days, working days prior to the date of the meeting. So I will put that to those residents properly in writing so that they are aware of that, but just for the purpose of recording it in the minutes, that is the proper articulation of that deadline. Right, let's go to the agenda proper. Item 7. Recommendations from Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Chris, you have some to read out, I gather.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Bear with me a moment whilst I open it up. Okay, so there were a number of recommendations coming out of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I just needed to sort them as to how they need to be dealt with. So there's 3, as you say, for executive. They've put as follows: the committee notes with concern relating to the garden waste collection shortfall and requests that the executive investigate, resolve and bring back to this committee to scrutinise. So that relates to the perceived lost revenue from garden waste collections. Number 2 is the housing underspend in terms of capital for the HRA. The committee notes and will continue to monitor the underspend of capital and request a deeper analysis and details of any action plans for the forthcoming year, that any capital allocated is spent in line with the business plan. And 3 relates to Treasury income. And they said the committee notes with concern that without the superb performance of the Treasury Management Group, that for the 3rd consecutive year, the council would have been £600,000 overspent, and this is not sustainable going forward, and would appreciate further attention being given to this situation.
I'm just going to read out the Google definition of the word recommendation. A suggestion or proposal as to the best course of action, especially one put forward by an authoritative body. I'm not entirely sure I see any recommendations there, but I am certainly going to try and comment on them. So in the terms of the garden waste collection shortfall, that is already under action by Julian's department alongside Councillor Williams. The executive are continuing to do that. I am sure we can provide the scrutiny committee with the figures so that they can look at that themselves once we've done that investigation. Noting housing underspend in terms of capital, I mean, there's no recommendation there as far as I can see. That's something that we also note and understand the rationale behind. Paul, Mark, is there anything you want to say on that?
Well, only that only Rumpelstiltskin doesn't know about the supply chain pressures in the construction industry. And we are, like everybody else, not immune to them. And we're pressing ahead with our capital projects as best we can. With your permission, I'd like to talk about the Treasury management, which, if I recall, was a whole thread of the budgetary discussion that we had back in February. We are perfectly well aware that the Treasury management interest that we've been getting has been a small silver lining on the cloud of financial pressures that we face. And we have budgeted for it to decline as interest rates go forward and to take appropriate measures for it. We're painfully aware of it. We don't need to be reminded. What we would like to see is a lot more support, particularly from our critics, for the measures that we are taking to deal with it.
Steve.
Yes, just in relation to the garden waste collection, I completely endorse the comments which have just been made. I would certainly very much welcome any observations and comments and recommendations and work with the overview and scrutiny committees to augment the work that is going on as a result of officers working on this particular situation and trying to get to the bottom of it. Thank you.
So thank you for all of your comments. And I call them comments because, of course, they're also not recommendations. So I think a note I'd like to pass backwards to ONS, and I certainly will come along to the next one if any of them would like to have that discussion with me. I am not sure what we've just had been presented to are recommendations. They're comments and statements. I don't believe they're recommendations. They're not proposals of courses of action. They're not suggestions for other work. In fact, they've, instead of taking on something to scrutinise themselves, they've suggested that we scrutinise something that we've already been through, which is something that's come up before. So I would like to record for the minutes that I don't believe we've been given any recommendations. I've just been asked to note some comments that are in fact them noting some things. So, okay, any further comments, notes, recommendations? Nope. In which case then we move on to item 8, the Broadwater Park regeneration, which is with Councillor Merriweather to introduce, and really happy to see this one on the agenda. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, it is, Leader, very exciting. Excitement drawn out for a long time, but exciting nonetheless. Our redevelopment of the public land at Broadwater Park is a complex scheme that will enable the development of an historic landfill site for safe and wider public use and best value for this council. We've completed both our early community engagement and the desktop survey phase of our landfill monitoring, and the on-site monitoring continues, and indeed only tomorrow we'll see another test borehole being started on the site towards the middle of the old golf course area, and there will be several days where a smaller rig will be taking samples around the site. But meanwhile, we've reached a point where we have, we believe, sufficient information that we need to advance to the preparation of an options appraisal for the redevelopment of the site, together with an initial planning application necessary to address the remediation works of the landfill only. On engagement and consultation too, the report is detailed and self-explanatory enough not to need repeating now, other than to signpost again to the commonplace sites that we've developed for the project, which includes frequently asked questions and updates provided on anticipated timescales for the works. But I would like to stress again, for the avoidance of any doubt, no decisions can or will be taken about the future use of the site until the options have been appropriately defined, appraised, and further engaged upon with the community. The recommendations to allocate budget to enable the council to complete this next phase of this work to secure best value for what is a difficult but still publicly owned site are in the report. And as I said, this is a complex scheme, and I'd like to thank our officers who've been working across many disciplines with skill and professionalism to bring it further forward, and I commend these recommendations to the executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'd just like to take the opportunity to also thank our officers that have been involved in this, and for a long time as well. We've had this going through, and it's really good to see the next phases of this come forward and to be so clear about what's coming next. I've got Liz and then Steve.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to express my full support for the recommendations laid out in the report, and also to thank officers. They've still been progressing this project despite all of the other stuff that's been going on within the council. And this project is a crucial step toward fulfilling the commitment we made to the community in 2023 to transform this site into a vibrant, accessible public space. It has the potential to become a cornerstone of Godalming's recreational facilities, but obviously, as Councillor Merriweather has outlined, we must address the urgent issue of the land cap. And to this end, as outlined in the report, the proposal is to engage a multidisciplinary team to identify and implement a sustainable solution. The budget allocations have already been outlined within the report, and this is a first critical step, obviously, to bring this space back into community use and ensuring the long-term environmental sustainability of the site. This aligns with our strategic priorities, our corporate priorities, and it also provides an opportunity for some income generation through recreational and leisure activities as well. And the plans will offer inclusive spaces for physical activities, such as has been outlined, bike trails and skate parks. And it'll be really interesting to see, you know, with further consultation with stakeholders as well, what we can finally achieve on this site. You know, engagement's been really good so far. As we spoke earlier, there's been nearly 2,000 residents who have shared their ideas, and a lot of ongoing engagement with local groups, including the football club. So as we move forward, we will continue on with this engagement, and I'm sure that we will come up with a really exciting project that will breathe new life into Broadwater Park and create a vibrant space for our residents. Thank you.
And it's worth just reflecting that the top 3 comms engagements we've had at Waverley since we've all been here. The first one is Broadwater Park with just around about 2,000. The second one, I think, was the climate emergency, which had a bit over 1,000, but the not far behind was dog poo and dogs in general. So I mean, it's seeing what motivates people to respond to consultations is always an interesting thing in this job. Steve.
I remember that. Yeah, can I just add thanks to officers for the enormous amount of work on this, and also actually thanks to Councillor Merriweather for his persistence and ongoing work on this issue for about 5 years now. I remember 5 years ago, as a coalition administration, we inherited a number of legacy issues which we were not happy with. And there was the range of issues around the lease on Broadwater Park, which required an enormous amount of work to unravel the damage and set the tone for the future. Now, with that, I won't go into that historic detail now. It's not the time to do that. But I think it is a time to say that without the action that we took then and the work to acquire that site, we would not have the opportunity now to debate the exciting possibilities in terms of the potential use of the land, including those possibilities outlined in paragraph 7.2, and the exciting possibilities for enhancing biodiversity on this former landfill site. I think this is really welcome. There's still a lot ahead of us. It's going to take a long time because of the situation we are in, but we will be doing something that will enhance the community, will enhance the facilities for the community of Godalming, and I wholeheartedly support it.
So I think we've got the errant microphone issue again. It's not somebody who's left it on. It's just there's some reverb that keeps cropping up in the chamber, so don't worry. So yeah, I mean, this one for me, we're going to be taking this out to residents again when we've got to the next stage with options appraisal. And I think we're going to get to the point where we can start doing some really good things on this site. I think the one thing I'll just flag to residents is that from tomorrow, you'll possibly see a 3 to 4 metre borehole rig erected at the centre of the site, which is something that I think people who want to start seeing some things going on the site, you will almost certainly see that. And there's going to be some other ancillary boreholes going on around the site. For those of you who are on social media, I've put a map up of the site that's the bit under the landfill, excluding the football club's ground, which is also probably under there as well. It's a slightly out-of-date map at this point, but it's really just to give an indication of scale. But you'll start seeing some of those changes, some of those things happening on the ground to support the desktop studies that have already happened. Are there any other comments or questions from anybody? Otherwise, I'll move to the recommendations. Apologies, I didn't take a formal seconder. The formal seconder is me on this one. In which case, I shall then go to the recommendations. Can I have all those in favour of the recommendations as highlighted in clause 2, sections 2.1, 2.3? Thank you very much, everyone. Item 9, joint corporate health and safety management, which is with Tony. Seconder is me.
Thank you, Leader. And indeed, I'd like to start by thanking officers for the preparation of this important report. The Council has a legal and a moral responsibility to operate in accordance with the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 and the regulations set out under this legislation. The requirements ensure that as an employer, the Council operates in a safe manner so as not to expose employees, visitors, and persons impacted by the Council services to health and safety risk. It has been recognised that due to a long-standing vacancy at Waverley and the recent retirement of an officer at Guildford Borough Council, there is currently a lack of resource which has the potential to impact council employees, visitors and service users. Indeed, concerns have been raised in recent months by staff, service manager and Unison representatives in relation to the robustness of the health and safety arrangements for both Waverley and Guildford Borough Council. Currently, both Waverley and Guildford Borough Councils manage their corporate health and safety functions separately. The Executive should note that the burden of health and safety compliance at Guildford is higher than that at Waverley, because Guildford has more in-house services such as waste and ground maintenance services, including the depot facility. Currently, at Waverley, there is one full-time corporate health and safety officer post. This post has actually been vacant for over 12 months, despite a number of advertisements, and as a result has been filled by an interim officer. At Guildford, there are two full-time corporate health and safety lead posts, one of which is also vacant due to a recent retirement. To build resilience in the management of corporate health and safety at both councils, it is proposed to appoint a joint health and safety manager who will be supported by two existing corporate health and safety officer/lead posts, one in each authority. This will enable best practice to be shared, as well as the development of mirrored policy, procedure and training material. The proposal will create a new role at Waverley, improving our resilience. At Guildford, it will enable the food safety and licensing lead to focus on the improvements which they need to be made in this area. It is proposed that the costs of the joint posts will be split 40% to Waverley Borough Council and 60% to Guildford Borough Council to reflect the increased requirements at Guildford Borough Council. The recommendation before you comes in two parts. Firstly, to approve the Head of Paid Services proposal to create a new post of Joint Corporate Health and Safety Manager as set out in the report before you. Secondly, to delegate authority to the monitoring officer to amend the current inter-authority agreement between Guildford Borough Council and Waverley Borough Council to include the new joint role as set out in the report before you. The risks of not doing so are laid out in full in points 9.1 to point 9.3 and, as you will note, make stark reading. As a result, I commend the recommendations in this report to the executive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. I mean, the safety of our staff and our residents is obviously paramount. I think if we can do this in a way that responds to the situation that we have with our staffing at the moment, and also does this in a way that we collaborate with Guildford to have a more efficient version of the same thing, I think it's absolutely a no-brainer. Any comments, anyone? In which case, I'll move to the recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you very much indeed. Moving then on to item 10, SIL strategic bidding cycle. Another one that says take 2 seconds to say, but is based upon an absolute mass of work that goes before it. And I believe that is with Councillor Merriweather to introduce.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm sorry our opposition colleagues haven't stayed for this, because it would have been useful for them to hear. The SIL Executive Working Group is only responsible for making recommendations in regard to the allocation of strategic SIL. This report doesn't cover either neighbourhood SIL expenditure, which is reserved to our relevant towns and parish councils, or any matters relating to the charging, collection and enforcement of SIL, which are not within the responsibility of the SIL EWG. We currently operate to rules set out for us nationally in the SIL Regulations 2010 as amended, and locally, at least for the time being, in the governance arrangements defined by our last Conservative administration in December 2018 and March 2019, which established the competitive bidding process that's described in the report. Since then, each and every bid received, whether successful or not, has been publicly accounted for in the annual bidding round reports, up to and including this one, and our public Execom, SIL and Section 106 database accounts for every pound of SIL from cradle to grave to doubly ensure transparency. The 2024-25 strategic SIL bidding round was the 5th such round of its kind under these inherited arrangements, including the recommendations now before you. We will have approved funding of nearly £18 million of strategic SIL for over 40 projects. After a very slow start, Surrey County Council is now the largest single strategic SIL recipient for projects from Farnham to Cranley, where strategic SIL's also been allocated to support Waverley's planned leisure centre. It's also encouraging to see the health sector now catching up with schools for bids, perhaps on the back of this council's success in working with the NHS for the new central surgery and pharmacy also in Farnham. It's important to note that the privatised utilities, including water and energy, are not eligible to even bid for SIL, and we've seen mixed success in bids from the voluntary and charitable sector. But 5 years in, the bids from this round will deliver barely half of the available pot being allocated, and it's a concern that this inherited, competitive and fragmented strategic bidding SIL process is not delivering the outcomes that our residents deserve either in terms of the number or the quality of bids. We think that we can do better. And so I am pleased that we're reviewing the process for the allocation of strategic SIL with the aim of encouraging more and better proposals for eligible strategic infrastructure projects. I'd like to thank our officers who engaged throughout the year with prospective applicants and prepare the granular analysis on which bids can be assessed, and support the EWG over the 3 long and highly intensive sessions when it considered them earlier this year. I commend these recommendations to the Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And I just want to also thank our officers and also the members of the board that reviewed the applications. I mean, for anybody who, and there are quite a few people who treat this whole process as a quite a flippant thing from the outside, I would urge them when we open up this committee a little bit more in the next few months to go and observe it at least once, so you get a flavour for the level of detail and engagement in the subject matter that is required to do this job properly and to meet actually some fairly complicated rules. It is good to see some Surrey bids actually getting through and they've had a high enough quality. But as one of the 2 county councillors sitting here in this room right now, and hopefully you all agree with me, Liz, still getting highways and other officers to actually have the time to put in SIL bids remains a challenge. And the county generally end up being quite hostile to road maintenance for new roads because they can't afford the maintenance of the current roads. And that leads to a cycle where infrastructure isn't being bid for. And just me asking a semi-rhetorical question to you, Mark, you can't, as a private company, bid for this. So we can't, for example, not that we would, I think, but water companies, for example, would not be eligible to bid for this sort of process.
No, they can't. And this is, and in fact, that takes me on to another concern for me. I know this is strategic SIL, but I think perhaps it's even more appropriate for neighbourhood SIL. It's competitive. It's a bidding process. It's fragmented. It is structurally disadvantaging, if that's a word. It structurally disadvantages those, particularly community and voluntary organisations who need it most, but don't have the resources to put an appropriate bid together. It is self-defeating in that regard, and that's one reason why it's something that I think we need to reform.
I mean, something that will be a little easier perhaps for a new unitary to do because they'll have all sides of the equation. But just as an example here, let's just say if we wanted to get Surrey to put some SIL, to apply for some SIL for dealing with the Portsmouth Road from Godalming to Guildford. Well, you reach halfway down the line and there's no SIL because it's in Guildford. So, I mean, it's that level of patchy coverage and fragmented structure that just doesn't aid any of this, does it?
I'm sorry, Kiko. I just want to say, you know, Surrey is curious because only Surrey seems to think that filling potholes is a capital expenditure. I'm afraid filling potholes, I mean, I don't even think Surrey could stretch to imagining filling potholes as SIL eligible. But, you know, I'll wait to see them try.
I'm waiting for an application in Godstone and Tandridge, perhaps. Kika.
I'm very glad to hear that you're thinking of reforming this because it's really important that money gets to be used properly. But just from my point of view, I started working on the pump track at Sandy Hill nearly 3 years ago, it must be. We did have a long time where we had to look at how the place had rewilded, so it took a year for that. And because it, you know, ended up having beautiful orchids and things like that, we were unable to use the area as a bike track as it had been many years ago. But there was an area that was able to be used, which sort of lies alongside that. And that pump track comes to an area where there was multiple deprivation, and it was extremely important. And I'm really pleased as well that I noticed as well, being told by one of the officers that Sandy Hill playground has been reinvigorated and redone, and we also now have the pump track which will be going ahead. So I'm really, really pleased about that. And I do think that, again, people who are trying to do something in a local community, as you say, don't have the wherewithal, the skill or the money to do that, really need some help with that to attain those sort of things. So, yeah, thanks.
Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I'm for full disclosure, obviously, I'm not obviously, but I'm a member of the SIL working group that look at the applications after they've gone through several levels of officers looking at them, and the amount of work, as you've said, Leader, is huge on each of these applications. And I'd like to particularly thank Marissa for the amount of work that she has done on this as well. And I know that none of us, I don't think, agree that things like school places should be bid for for the expansion of secondary school place provision, say in Farnham, as is on the one of the recommended SIL allocations. I think we find the whole system a bit incongruous, really. But however, I am pleased to see some of the applications that are coming through, and the positive thing about SIL is that we can monitor and get these projects done. As Councillor Mirrlees has just said, you know, the Sandy Hill Playground, you know, sometimes they're there with Section 106 money, it can go into a pot, and sometimes it does take a long time to spend that. So at least with the SIL allocation, we do actually see things happening fairly quickly. So I'm sure, well, hopefully this will be looked into, the whole SIL structure will be looked into by government and reviewed, and we will come up with something that works much better for our communities as well. Thank you.
I think it's just worth making that point. There's only so far we can actually amend this locally, in that it derives from national legislation, and we have been told several times that there is an intent to reform this process, but we will see. Right, any further comments, anybody? Otherwise I will move to the recommendations, which, considering sorry, my apologies, Jerry, you had registered to speak on this and I should have taken you first. My sincere apologies, that's on me. Jerry, would you like to speak now?
Only very briefly. Thank you very much. Fortunately, that in your introduction and also in Councillor Merryweather's remarks, particularly, you've covered virtually everything that I wanted to say, and where I thought that there were issues that needed to be addressed. So it's great news that we are. We know we need to do more and better, as has been said. Very pleased for Councillor Mirrlees and Sandy Hill, particularly, of course, the residents, about the pump track. Only one thing where I think people, you know, in Farnham particularly, might feel a little disgruntled, I suppose, is in respect of Potter's Gate. But I saw the explanation that was in there. I thought that people might be concerned, because I think some weeks ago, if I remember, when we were talking about Coxbridge and the SIL allocations there, it looked like we were able to use the money for CIL from Coxbridge to remedy some sort of existing lacking of infrastructure, let's say, in terms of transport. And I was just concerned that people might think that that meant that Potters Gate School were being treated unfairly there. But I would just refer to paragraph 7.3, which makes it absolutely clear that it can be used, but only in instances where development is making things worse. And so I think this has been allocated fairly. And it's great to see that the things where there's money is being spent, and particularly under Surrey County Council, are other than Cranley, which is subject to planning permission, and they've got a year to do it, and where we've got Surrey County Council, the LC whip, and a couple of £1 million on school expansion as well, is going to be subject to feasibility. And you know, obviously, if they don't get their act together in respect of that, then we will be able to spend the money on something else. But let's hope that Surrey do come up with the goods there for us, because there is much needed stuff. I think everybody's done a lot of hard work on this, and I think and I think people need to respect that. Many thanks to the people who've worked so hard on doing this, because it's not an easy job by any means. So I'm not one of the people who are disgruntled. I'm gruntled, so I hope you are too. Thank you.
Gruntlement is always welcome as well. Honestly, I have to say, echo Mark's point, that it's disappointing, considering the number of comments in other places we get about how SIL is spent, that many of those people who've made comments are not here, even though some of them were in fact here an hour ago. They could have probably stayed for this one. I'd have even moved it forward for them if they'd have wanted to. But anyway, any further comments on the item? Otherwise, I'll move to the recommendations. Okay, in which case the executive is asked to approve recommendations 2.1A through D as set out in the report. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you. And once again, thank you to those who've done an immense amount of work, officers and members, to process all of these items. It is a massive deal that most people who look at this don't appreciate. Right, item 11, the risk management strategy, which is to be introduced and proposed by Councillor Keel and seconded by myself, Victoria.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm very pleased to introduce this item, which is a new risk management strategy for Waverley Borough Council. This has been created in alignment with Guildford Borough Council and is presented here for us to hopefully adopt today. So this new risk management strategy covers the period 2025-26 to 2028-29 and is based on the Government Orange Book. Zurich Resilience Solutions have reviewed our strategy and confirmed that it's comprehensive. The strategy is a cornerstone of our commitment as a council to effective governance and leadership. It will ensure that we are resilient and well run in accordance with our new corporate strategy. In adopting this strategy, we are committing to risk management being an integral part of our decision making, contributing to the resilience and success of our council. Following the formal approval and adoption of this strategy, the team will be working hard to embed the strategy across the council, building a positive risk culture and continuously improving our practices, which will enable us to respond effectively to ever-changing circumstances. We are very grateful for the consideration and expertise of our Audit and Risk Committee, who reviewed the strategy at their last meeting. The comments from the committee included that the new risk management strategy and its methodology are a significant step forward and that there is a lot of clarity within the documents. Particularly, they highlighted the articulation of the three-line of defence model, the continuous improvement and the work that will go into embedding the strategy across the council and developing the risk culture. I'd like to end by thanking our officers for working so diligently on this for what has been a number of months, and to Zurich for their advice. Special thanks in particular to Jenny Sturgis, Luke Harvey and to Robin Taylor, who until recently was our lead on this. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you. And just to echo the thanks to Jenny and Luke and also to Robin. The other thing as well, I mean, officers have hosted a couple of briefings for members on this to get us all up to code on it, and I'm pretty sure now that we're at a point where we can move forward and implement this here. I'd also want to thank the Audit and Risk Committee, particularly the chair. They've been working with us in lockstep on this, as effectively they're going to be the ones that will provide the scrutiny and monitoring of our risk management practices. Certainly makes sense for us to have a shared strategy with Guildford. That doesn't mean that we have absolutely the same risk appetite and the way we handle it. It just means that we're all reading from the same rule book effectively. And that, bearing in mind we've got shared offices, I think is a fundamental importance as we move forward. I'm sure I had some hands. Steve and then Mark.
Yes, completely endorse what you've just said, but just want to draw members' attention to section 9 or 9.1 of this report, which says under key risks, there are no risks arising from this report. I would suggest that there are considerable risks arising from not adopting this report. So I would suggest we support it.
The risk of getting into a very meta wormhole of a debate. Fair enough. Mark.
Well, funnily, I wanted to make a serious point, but Steve's managed to managed to make it so that I can't say anything without it being lighthearted. Yes, thanks to the Audit and Risk Committee, and I was one of the few who attended. I think we were all there, but I attended the online briefing that we had, including from Allianz. And you know, this is a dry subject at the best of times, and I'm speaking as an accountant, so that's saying something. But I found the way that the way that this was presented digestible, understandable, and quite refreshing. And the risk is, to me, is not just that we don't adopt this report. It is a risk to me that some of our colleagues may not have read it or understood it. And I think that's a great shame.
And I should also say thank you to our colleagues at Guildford Borough Council who were on many of those training things with us. And I think we're all on the same page as to the point of this and how it works. And yes, it is a dry subject, but certainly when it comes to doing our project management and making sure that we're doing things properly, this is a good framework that we can follow. Any further comments? I'm going to make one minor executive amendment, which is that in the resolution it says approve the risk management strategy 25 to 25, and it should say 26. But other than that, Victoria, did you have anything to add?
Only that there will be some further briefings for members in May on this, in the middle of May. So hopefully everyone will have a chance to be reacquainted with it.
Thank you. In which case, I'm going to read the recommendations as there are only two. So the executive resolves to approve the risk management strategy 2025-26 to 28 to 29, and to delegate authority to the Joint Assistant Director of Strategy and Corporate Services to make any minor amendments to the risk management strategy as required in consultation with the Leader of the Council. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Moving then on to item 12, the procurement pipeline housing, which I think we've agreed is with Mark to introduce.
Well, apparently.
And Paul, I assume you're seconding.
And I shall be very brief. Under the new contract procedure rules approved by this council in June 24, the executive must give permission to commence any procurement activity with a value greater than £200,000. This report seeks that permission for the pipeline as it was at January 25. For 25-26 in respect of a series of projects for housing which are listed in Appendix 1. I believe they are self-explanatory, so I will go straight to commending the recommendation for these 10 procurements to commence. Thanks.
Can I just confirm, Paul, you're happy to be confirmed as the seconder in the minutes? Just to...
Absolutely happy to
Thank you.
second it, and hope it goes through, everybody.
Any further comments, anyone? Otherwise, I'll bring it to the recommendation. Nope, so the executive gives approval for the procurements listed in Appendix 1 to commence. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you very much indeed. Item 13, procurement pipeline 25-26, which is with Mark again.
Yeah, Paul didn't volunteer for this one. So so the CPRs that I've just mentioned still must, the executive still must give permission to commence any procurement activity that could result in a key decision as the estimated value is greater than £200,000 or it significantly impacts 2 or more wards. This report seeks that permission for the contracts identified in this Appendix 1, but I would just like to clarify that for these contracts in this appendix, the anticipated contract values that are presented for the 3 framework procurements are the estimated envelope of the total value of the individual contracts that may be awarded under the frameworks being procured. They're not the cost of the framework contract itself. Otherwise, I commend the recommendation for these 5 procurements as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That's very clear. I'll list myself as the seconder for this. Can I have any other comments? No, in which case I'll move to the recommendation. So the executive resolves to approve that the commencement of the procurement activities for 2025-2026 that are listed as in Appendix 1. And have all those in favour, please show. Thank you very much indeed. Right, item 14. We do have one registered speaker on this, so I need to make sure I come to Jerry in a moment. But item 14, Local Authority Housing Fund Round 3, which is with Councillor Paul Rivers to propose, and I will second. Paul.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for seconding. I want to thank Louisa Blundell for her wonderful, fulsome report. Not one that one can summarise quickly or in a few words, so I won't use a few words, I'll use a few more words. Let me just bring it together. Some time ago, a few years back, there was a 1.2 billion local authority housing fund that the government established as a capital fund that supports councils like us in England to obtain housing for those who are unable to find settled accommodation on specific resettlement schemes. There were 3 rounds. Round 1 provided £500 million of funding for local authorities to obtain accommodation for families with housing needs who have arrived in the UK via Ukrainian and Afghan resettlement and relocation schemes round 2, provided 250 million of funding, with the majority of the funding used to house those on Afghan resettlement schemes currently in bridging accommodation, and the rest used to ease wider homelessness pressures. And round 3, most recently, provided 450 million of funding to support local authorities to obtain better quality temporary accommodation, and will also provide safe and suitable housing for those on the Afghan resettlement schemes who are unable to secure their own housing. Now, this council was allocated a total of, well, it's in the report, just over £2 million in round 1, funding to provide a maximum of 40% of the cost of each property, and allowing us the acquisition of a total of 11 homes. Now, of the previously approved budget at this stage of a total of 4.9 million, there is 2.18 million budget remaining. 710,000 of this is from the LAHF funding. Louisa's team will continue to identify and acquire the remaining 3 homes from round 1 funded from this round 1 funding, and using the residual budget and funding allocation that is to be spent during this council year, 25 to 26. We have received a further allocation of funding from the LAHF round 3, and it is proposed that 3 new homes will be acquired using the £779,161 of grant funding, with the remaining being funded from the housing revenue account as set out in section 13 of the report. Now, a lot of this information is exempt, and I have no wish to proceed into that. In brief, then, the recommendation for us tonight is in 5 sections, which I'll read out. The recommendation that the council approves a budget of £1,259,500 to be added to the capital programme, £779,161 of which is LAHF round 3 grant funding, with the balance being funded from the housing revenue account. 2, to approve the purchase of 3 properties in the terms set out in this report, subject to budgetary approval from full council and delegate authority to the Assistant Director Housing Services in consultation with the portfolio holders of housing delivery and housing operations and services to purchase the necessary properties to deliver this excellent project. And 3, approve the change to the allocations policy in respect of the 3 homes as set out in section 10.4. 4, subject to budgetary approval by full council, to delegate authority to the Assistant Director Housing Services to tender and enter into any contract to repair or to bring up to standard any property purchased under this project, provided the costs can be met within the overall project budget. And lastly, number 5, note the update of spend against the allocation of LAHF round 1 funding. Leader, that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. I've got one registered speaker, which is Jerry. Councillor Hyman, my apologies, after you.
Well, thank you very much. I absolutely agree with Councillor Paul Rivers there that this isn't something which you can cover in the space of 1 or 2 words, unfortunately. But I see that this is going to be coming to council. Both this and the next item are going to be coming to council, presumably the 22nd, is it, or something like that of the month? We've got one in April, haven't we? Which means that all of these documents are going to be in front of us. There's a fantastic amount of information which I think all councillors should read. I've noticed particularly under the report for item 14, not so much under item 15, which is lots of estate agent stuff. And I haven't had a chance to go through it with a toothpick because I only received it this afternoon. I've been flicking through it. So I'm going to not bother saying anything. My comment on this is pass. And for the next item, thank you. So thanks for the evening, and I'll leave you now. Bye.
Thanks, Jerry. Yes, indeed, part of this will come to council on the 22nd. That would be the budget approval section, part 2, I believe, and also part 4. Right, any other speakers on this? Otherwise, I will say thank you to Louisa and also to Finance for getting this done. We are, as a council, excellent at getting bid funding through the door, and bearing in mind what we're doing for it is getting more social houses. Certainly no argument from me whatsoever. Councillor Rivers has read the recommendation out. Any final speakers before I move to the recommendations? So as stated, Roman numerals 1 I through V, 1 through 5. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much indeed. And then moving on to the affordable housing delivery, acquisition of affordable homes through section 106, to be introduced and proposed by Paul Rivers, seconded by myself. After you, Councillor Rivers.
Thank you, Leader. And again, thank you to you, Louisa. This council has an opportunity to acquire a total of 26 new homes on 3 sites, which are in Farnham, Chiddingfold and Hindhead, specifically for those in housing need. So we are looking for 19 homes in the Hawthorns in Farnham, 3 homes in Ridgely Road, Chiddingfold, and 4 homes in the Hindhead. Delivery of decent and affordable homes is one of the corporate priorities of the council. This report and associated exempt annexes provide details of 3 opportunities to acquire new homes on sites being developed under S106 planning legal agreements. Annex 2 provides details of how each of the acquisitions will be funded, their viability and total budget of 7.52 million. The business cases and viability appraisals have been reviewed by the council finance team and our external consultant, Haverley Consulting Limited. Haverley have also provided an independent value for money review and confirmed that the council are using robust development assumptions that are in line with the sector comparison and market levels. We have been asked this evening to consider the report, its business cases, associated appendices, and recommendations made in section 2. Would you like me to read out the? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And also just to add again, thanks to Louisa. I mean, we don't get often recommendations that allow for 26 new properties to come onto our books. So it's very, very nice recommendations indeed, particularly as they're in areas that definitely need them, in some places that we don't get a lot of social housing come up, particularly Chiddingfold and Hindhead. That's a decent amount in Farnham, but I do want to just flag that putting social housing in places like Chiddingfold and Hindhead is areas we just do not have a lot of social stock. Any further comments, anyone, before I move to the recommendations? In which case the recommendations are listed 1, 2, and then in part 2, 1 and 2. Can I have all those in favour of the recommendations, please show? Thank you very much indeed, everyone. There is no need to exclude press or public, and my clock is broken on here. So at 20:22, I can close the meeting.